Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Propulsion Swimming podcast. I'm your host Scott and back with me as always is my good friend Dan, and on this week's episode we are joined by the Performance Pathway Lead Swim Coach at British Swimming, Nathan Hilton.
Yeah, I feel like this podcast has got off to a pretty strong start to the year.
Yeah.
Alice Thomas was great at telling us about all of her injuries and her career. And then we had Jamie Ingram last week chatting about his goals for the upcoming season, as well as launching our new YouTube channel. So go and subscribe if you haven't already. But for this week, I'm really excited to learn a little more about a very important role within British swimming, but one maybe we don't know enough about.
Yes, absolutely. So let's have a quick listen to what is to come on this week's episode.
My aim isn't to have them good when they're 9, 10, 11, 12. If they're good and they're fast at that age, fantastic. But if they're not, look, we want them good as keep progressing as come through the sport. So look, age group swimming for me is just about developing their aerobic capacity, so making sure that they're swimming anything up to kind of maybe threshold type pace, but nothing more than that. Technique, kick, and a bit of speed development to make sure that we've got a continual flow of swimmers. We've got to make sure that we've got the coaching staff there behind the scenes, because if for every swimmer that you get come through the pathway, look, that coach might see 10 more come through their pathway in their coaching career, so the coach for me is almost the most important part of it all.
Now, on this week's episode of the Propulsion Swimming podcast, we are going to be chatting to Nathan Hilton about all things Performance Pathway Lead, essentially what that role is and how it helps swimmers and coaches. Because going into our research into this podcast episode, me and Dan actually didn't know enough about the role. So I'm really excited to hear, Dan, essentially someone who is now in that role and how they help British swimming, because it is a very important position.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the idea of it is to help an athlete or a swimmer come through the ranks from junior through to senior and getting the side support and guidance. So honestly, I just want to find out what the role is, what he does, and how he helps the swimmers and coaches. I think that's going to be a question that we're going to throw out there as well.
Yeah, and we'll also touch a little bit upon NOVA, because Nathan was there for 9 years, as well as a little bit about Freya Colbert, seeing as she is potentially one of the swimmers of the future for British swimming. So, welcome on to this week's podcast, the former Director of Coaching at NOVA Centurions and the newly appointed Performance Pathway Lead Swimming Coach at British Swimming, Nathan Hilton. Nathan, thank you for coming on to the podcast this week. How are things with you?
Fantastic, guys. Thank you for having me. Literally just straight off the British Swimming distance camp, finished this morning. So it's been a pretty busy week this week, working with the guys down in Loughborough all week. So yeah, good, but tired, ready for the weekend.
Definitely. Now, first of all, I guess we've got to give you a big congratulations on your new job role at British Swimming. It must be kind of a big moment for your coaching career.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, absolutely. I've been coaching on deck for 25 years now, so late 90s, early 2000s, and it's gone in a flash. I kind of started off as assistant coach in Lincoln, where I used to swim with Ian Turner back in the 90s. Started off as assistant coach with Graham Bassett at Lincoln Vulcans. Progressed on to head coach at Cleethorpes from about 2003 to 2008, and then moved to the Royal School in Wolverhampton. That's still up and going now, where Mark Spackman is. I've known.
Good school.
So I set that up back in 2008, and I was there till 2014, which when I obviously moved to Nova. I know the coach who's there at the minute, Mark. I've known Mark since day dot, so we used to swim together in Lincoln. So he kind of followed me on at the Royal, and then obviously on to Nova in 2014. So I've been there kind of 9 years. This year, and then obviously, really kind of reaching the pinnacle of the sport and actually having the privilege to work at the governing body, and that's absolutely how I would see it. I've got the opportunity to work with all the coaches, support staff, and everybody throughout the country. It's just a great privilege to have the opportunity to be able to do that.
Yeah, wow. I mean, we're going to talk more about Nova later on in the episode, but how did the role at British Swimming come about?
Yeah, so I don't like you guys have obviously just chatted to me behind the scenes. It's not a new role. So effectively, what's happened is it's the role that Kevin Renshaw would have been fulfilling, but his circumstances have changed slightly, which meant that what British Swimming wanted to do was look at a kind of like a shared role, effectively. Um, so obviously Kevin's also performance pathway lead, so we're both the performance pathway lead. Um, but he also covers off the distance swimming role as well within British Swimming. So he's kind of covering the more distance swimming, a bit of the pathway, and then I'm obviously picking up the rest of the pathway and doing a little bit with the distance side of things as well.
Yeah, we have seen Kevin's love for distance swimming all over
Yeah,
Twitter. It's very
yeah,
obvious to see.
yeah. And guys, don't get me wrong, I'm similar as well. So if you look at a lot of my success over the last 20 years, it's been similar type events as well.
Yeah. So, performance pathway lead, then, what sort of responsibilities does that job title have?
Yeah, so kind of really myself, Kevin, and Alan Lynn, because Alan's like kind of our line managers, head of development. We're kind of responsible really for the pathway and working with the guys that are on podium potential. So
Okay.
I've obviously got your world class program. Obviously, kind of Bill and Chris and those guys are looking after the podium guys, so the Olympic medal winners and finalists and all that kind of stuff. And then myself, Kevin, and Alan are kind of responsible for right who are our next guys, who are the ones that we're bringing through the pathway to make sure that look in another 18 months, 5.5 years, actually we've got make sure that look if Adam Pete is not there or James Guy's not there, that actually look we make sure that we've got other people there coming through and actually delivering that same kind of success really.
So how do you spot these swimmers then from an early sort of age? Is it sort of a
Yeah.
scouting system at sort of national level meets or club visits? How does it work?
I think we've talked long and hard on. We've obviously all myself and Kevin, and then obviously a lot of the coaches have been on deck this week, all in one place, all at one time. And that's some of the discussions that would take place on these camps would be what that looks like. And this is just my own personal belief. My own personal belief is that there's talent everywhere. Now, we obviously have certain programs throughout the country that produce regularly, but there's going to be kids in programs out there that haven't got that opportunity to be in an environment like that. But that doesn't mean they've not got the same ability as X who's in there, but can just train 9 times a week. And I'll give you an example. One of the girls that I used to coach that was on the senior open water team, Polly Holden. So she made it to European Championships in 2018, I think. So 5 years ago now. But she came into our program at university age, and she came in on the I'll tell you exactly what happened. She came in and she kind of had a pretty good 100 and 200. So she was going like 57 for the 100 and 205 for the 200. Um, she was going, I think, about 426 or 427 for the 400, and I think she was going 920 for the 800. Um, so I thought, well, actually, look, she probably needs to go in the more sprint-based group. I'll put her in the 100 200 group. It became pretty evident pretty quickly that she was an endurance-based athlete, and within 12 months, we had her from 920 to 838 in less than 12 months and made it onto the senior open water team and actually was progressing well until she had a injury that cut short her career really. So I think that in my opinion, you don't just want to be looking at the people that are on this kind of particular pathway that the governing body's put in place. Yes, it's important and we have structures around that, but there's talent everywhere, and actually some of those people have come from outside that pathway. You know.
So there really isn't an age cap on these people who can get podium potential funding and performance pathway help.
I think that there's not an age cap on it, but I think there'll be certain criteria that you probably want to be hitting along the way. So look, there'll be a big data drive behind the scenes in British swimming in terms of are those people on track to deliver podium success, and and make no mistake about it, that's ultimately what British swimming are about. That they're responsible. You know that they have government-based money to deliver podium success at a senior international level. But there's obviously processes and stuff to go through to make sure that we do that really well. So there's not a cap per se, but there's likely, look, you guys understand what swimming's like in the UK. There's kind of pinch points around when people kind of decide that actually they don't want to swim anymore. One of those is when they kind of go to university.
Yep.
Yeah.
My own personal opinion is that I think we have a lot of people that we don't see the best of because they give up too soon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that actually
100%,
they finish
yeah.
swimming too early.
Yeah, I mean, when you identify these swimmers, how do you sort of guide them through the future? Do you sort of stop them from, like, if they're training too hard at too younger age, do you then prevent or stop them from doing that to avoid burnout? Is there sort of a process that you sort of follow?
It's interesting. So and we've obviously been a group of coaches together this week, and kind of we've had meetings, coaches meetings, and discussions and stuff like that. And I think one of the key things is making sure that there's a progression as they come through the pathway. So look, if they've been doing, and this would have been exactly the same at Nova. So I remember there's a guy at Nova that's been there since when Bill Furness was there. So Bill was obviously one of my predecessors. Bill's now the head coach of British Swimming. A guy called Tom O'Reilly. I remember Tom coming to me when I first started at Nova 9 years ago, and he said to me, "Tom's great, really unbelievably good with young swimmers, unbelievably good." And those kind of people are like the bedrock of what we're looking for, really. But I remember Tom saying to me, "What do you want from me?" And I said, "Look, Tom," I said, "my aim isn't to have them good when they're 9, 10, 11, 12. If they're good and they're fast at that age, fantastic. But if they're not, look, we want them good as keep progressing as come through the sport." So look, age group swimming for me is just about developing their aerobic capacity, so making sure that they're swimming anything up to kind of maybe threshold type pace, but nothing more than that. Technique, kick, and a bit of speed development. And that's it. It's as simple as that. If you hit those four things with age group swimmers, and you keep doing that until maybe that comes to a kind of plateau, then you need to start looking at, right, can we add a bit more training volume? Can we add some intensity into all that kind of stuff? Then you can't go far wrong with it. I've always said that swimming's not a complicated sport. You've got to turn up, work hard, and do it better than everybody else. It's easy,
It's like Graham Wardell said the very same thing.
Yeah, I was about to say that. He did.
Yeah.
Just said exactly
Having
the same
deja
thing.
vu. So as much as helping swimmers, then you're helping coaches as well as part of your role.
Yeah, I like to hope so. Yeah, because I think that in my mind, to make sure that we've got a continual flow of swimmers, we've got to make sure that we've got the coaching staff there behind the scenes. Because if for every swimmer that you get come through the pathway, look, that coach might see 10 more come through their pathway.
Yeah.
In their coaching career, So the coach for me is almost the most important part of it all, because they're the ones that are gonna, if you're educating them and they're learning and they're trying to get better all the time, they're the ones that are gonna keep producing the swimmers. So the swimmers will be there for a short lifespan. They might be there for 5, 10 years, that kind of time. But that coach might be there for 25 or 30 years. Well, if they've got 3 or 4 swimmers come through their pathway that are Olympic medal winning potential, then we need to make sure we keep those coaches engaged and keep them motivated.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you get involved in the training programs, both from the swimmer's point of view and the coach's point of view as well?
Yeah, so within the role that I'm in, I've got a certain group of athletes that I would look after. Now they would have a what's called an IAP, an individual action plan, and we would meet regularly with the athlete and the coach to talk around what their kind of goals are. And part of that obviously is kind of chatting with the coaches around the training plan and where they're at and what they're doing and all that kind of business, really.
I'm very interested in this. I know it's still very new to you as a new role, but what would represent success in this role?
I think we've obviously got and this is a big thing now, is that, like I've already said, look, our kind of responsibility is kind of making sure that we've got a continual stream of swimmers coming through the pathway that are going to deliver Olympic medal winning success for the country. But obviously there's a way of doing that, and what I mean by that is that, look, it's not just the swimming performance is obviously very important, but also, look, we've got a responsibility to make sure that we're looking after the person. Yeah. And actually we're developing a great person, and generally developing a great person, a great athlete will probably follow pretty quickly as well, you know? So I think success would look like, look, I've always been, one of the reasons I went to Nova from the Royal was at the Royal, we had just a small group of swimmers. I had like 20 swimmers there, and we had no pathway that led into that group. It was just literally somebody would ring you up, can we come and swim at the Royal? We're interested in scholarships. Yeah, no problem. What I enjoy seeing is, one of the reasons I went to Nova is, look, they came in at the bottom end when they were maybe 9 or 10 and progressed through the pathway, and I could see that whole journey for them all the way through the pathway. And for me, it's quite exciting to see, like, there's been some young girls on the distance camp this week that are like 13 or 14, but it's really exciting because they're really good, you know. So actually we could, yeah. So we could see those girls progress over the next period of time to a good senior level, you know. And that for me is exciting. I like to see the progress as they come through the pathway. So I think there's obviously the kind of medal winning type stuff, but also, look, the developing a great person and seeing them coming through the pathway, I think is fantastic as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of probably the most important aspects. You see, there's a breakpoint on Netflix about the tennis players, and they think they're like machines. They're going through day in, day out. They're winning every week because they're playing every week, and the stuff that they go through mentally is quite shocking, actually. That must be one of the main things to think about, more so than the medals and the swimming outcome, I guess.
Yeah, I think so, and I think I've been really fortunate, guys. I've worked with some tremendous athletes over the last 25 years. But one of the other things that I've always kind of done is try and educate myself and try and move myself forward. So the role that I'm doing now is kind of shared with Kevin, so it's a bit more part-time. So one of the things I'm looking at doing is potentially doing like a PhD. But I'd already done a master's with a guy called Mustafa Sarkar at Nottingham Trent University. So Mustafa's key area is resilience. So we myself and Mustafa have got a paper published together as well, and then that's around Olympic medal winning coaches. But I think, like you've just touched on it there, I think one of the key things, certainly with athletes and coaches for that matter as well, look, we almost have a fear of failure, when actually, look, if you're going to be good at something, you're going to fail at it, and probably multiple times, and that's okay. And I think sometimes swimmers and parents think that not doing a PB or not doing this is bad. As far as I'm concerned, it's probably the best thing that can happen, because actually you're probably going to learn more in that space than you learn if you're just winning all the time. Because at some point you're going to come up against Adam Peaty and you're going to get beaten. So, so you've got to learn that skill to be able to deal with that type of situation. There'll be somebody. A prime example, Rebecca Adlington, obviously one of the swimmers that had been in NOVA Centurion way back, double Olympic gold medalist in Beijing, gets to London. Everybody thinks, she's gonna do similar again. Oh, and then all of a sudden, 15-year-old Kate Ledecky pops out, and Rebecca gets 2 bronzes. You know, so I think failure is not a bad thing in my mind, and that's part of the developing athlete's journey, as far as I can see, and developing coaches as well.
Yeah, 100%. I really like actually hearing that it's a part-time role. It sounds kind of weird, but I actually love that you can work on your own development at the same time and almost bring in new knowledge into British Swimming, the whole setup, because it could be quite easy to have one person in the role, work them to the bone, and actually not learn anything new. I think being able to study at the same time and have it's almost keep it fresh for you.
Yeah,
it's a good thing.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons that I applied for the role. So I'd done my masters in I finished it in 2017, and my son was born that year. So he's kind of like 5 coming 6 this year. My daughter's 3 coming 4. So they've obviously consumed quite a bit of my time over the last 5 years. But I felt like, look, one, I needed a new challenge. I've been at Nova for 9 years, and kind of I'm not quite sure how Bill was there for 32 years. I think he was there for, because I maybe it's just me as a person, but kind of 9 years, and I was kind of maybe getting a bit itchy feet and thinking I need to challenge myself better here. And I just thought this provided the opportunity for me to do that. So it's obviously a little bit more relaxed because I've got kind of three days a week. But then what I'm doing at the minute is just exploring the possibility of maybe doing a PhD as well. But kind of in initial discussions for that already, one of the things we've talked about is, one, it's got to be of interest to me, but also secondly, look, of interest to British Swimming and the wider coaching community, because you don't just want to do something and not be of any interest to anyone. The whole point of research is finding a gap in the market and saying, actually, look, this could be beneficial for you guys, So I'm excited about the way things are right now.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of young swimmers given the chance to race at high-level competitions like at the World Cup Series or the TYR Pro Series in the States. Why is that important for British swimming right now?
Yeah, I think obviously you're always kind of looking. You're trying to look forward. You're trying to almost predict the future, and that's a hard thing to do. We're trying to predict future performance, So it's kind of and certainly this is just from my own personal perspective, and having dealt with people like Freya Colbert, Rosie Rudin, Alice Deering, Rachel Kelly, all manner of swimmers that have been transitioning to that level. I think one of the key things as they start to become more senior based athletes is just getting to the mindset of being comfortable when they're really uncomfortable. Because they need to be comfortable. If they're stepping on the blocks at the Olympic Games in lane 4, they need to be comfortable doing that.
Yeah.
And we should as a nation. Look, we went to Tokyo in 18 months ago, and we won 8 medals. First time we've ever done that ever. It's the best Olympics we've ever had. So we need to start believing that actually we are one of the top swimming nations in the world, because the evidence is suggesting that, and we are.
Yeah, it's the same message from what you've said so far in the podcast about resilience, isn't it? That's mirrored in why we're sending young swimmers to very big meets. There is the addition this season of the LEN under 23 European Swimming Championships?
Yes.
Do you know right now what British Swimming's kind of thoughts on that are, and will we be represented?
We're hoping so, but obviously with all of this stuff, there's cost attached to that.
Yeah.
And obviously it's something new. There's obviously a pot of money from UK Sport every kind of 4 years, and that money obviously only goes so far. And this is something new that's added to the calendar, so it's an additional cost that probably wasn't budgeted for when the submission to UK Sport would have gone in. So we're hoping so, because I think it's and I know the other staff, likes of Alan and Kevin and myself, all think that it's a good opportunity to help swimmers transition from kind of the junior ranks at European juniors. If you imagine the girls at 17 and the lads at 18, kind of get them to be able to transition through and into the senior team more effectively, I think, because that's definitely a thing that we could be better at, like in terms of putting more people, transitioning more people through the pathway to a senior level.
Yeah,
so our strength and depth becomes better. It's difficult. Yeah. It's a difficult thing to do. It's not easy. Not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, we've always supported the idea of racing as much as possible, but then does it get to a point where you race too much over a calendar year?
Yeah, I think you lads might be a little bit young to remember this, but I'm kind of, I'm 44 this month, so I kind of been around a while now, and I think one of the concerns for me, I think racing's really important because I think you learn a lot from that. I think that the reality of it is if you're racing all the time, you're fatiguing yourself.
Mm.
And in my mind, look, you need to be probably racing once a month, so maybe 12 times throughout the year. Because what that does is it kind of sets the marker of right, I'm racing this month. What have I done? Okay, so where my weak areas, where my strengths. Right, we've got another 4 weeks then to work on those areas and then try and be better at the next one. Okay, if you're continually racing, when do you ever get your rest and recovery?
Yeah. I mean,
You don't.
yeah.
You don't. That is the answer. You don't. And the reality of it is that rest and recovery is what gives you the adaptation to get you better.
Yeah.
So it's a key thing that I think developing swimmers and parents that are coming through the pathway is really important that they understand that, because what happens is obviously they race, they're fatigued, and then they probably don't turn up for training on Monday.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then their next training week's compromised, but also they've maybe not turned up for training Friday. So it's not just the one off; it's the accumulation of that loss of training volume over a period of time that will be a big difference to people.
Yeah. Is it crazy to me that when I was swimming 12 times in 1 year seems like a lot of racing? That sounds like a lot to me from when I was swimming.
Yeah, well, so if and I'm going to go back to the pandemic here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that certainly our coaching staff in Nova picked up on pretty quickly, and I think if people aren't looking at this, I think they may be behind the curve a little bit. What we saw was I think we got back into the pool roughly in about kind of March, April time, and I think we probably had about 12, 14 weeks until we raced in the summer at the festivals of swimming. Now, what we observed was but we obviously had no ability to race through that period because we weren't allowed to do that. So we were allowed to train, but we couldn't race. What we observed was, so what we did, we obviously trained, but we put on kind of almost like race simulations, like every 4 or 6 weeks through that period, just to simulate the racing. And what we saw was that we were still delivering really good best times in the summer. Now, I think one of the things that's apparent to me is when generally, certainly through this period, kind of October, November through till about February, if you're racing too much through that period, you're going to get fatigued. Your immune system's going to become compromised, and actually you're going to be out of the water ill regularly. And once you're out of the water, that's obviously then compromising your training again. So and I think one of the key things coming out of the pandemic for me was actually looking at the training and actually saying, do we need to race that much? Could we cut some racing out and actually rest and recover that weekend? And that's exactly what we did, and we did that prior to obviously Freya Colbert breaking out last year, and actually we think that helped her massively because actually we one of her biggest strengths was she never got ill. And over the 4 or 5 years I coached her, probably I could count on one hand the amount of days off she had off ill in that period of time. So, so it's definitely a thing. I think.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, should we touch a little bit upon Freya Colbert then, because she is one of almost your success stories of transitioning from junior to a senior level. She certainly broke out last summer. What is the ceiling, as far as you can see right now, of how far she could go?
Yeah, I think, look, forget about the swimming side of things. I'll talk to you a little bit, and I know she won't mind me. I know they're travelling back from altitude, spin at altitude for the last 3 weeks out there with the National Centre guys from Loughborough and Stirling. So So forget about the swimming side for a second. Just put that to one side. Freya as an individual, and kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. I remember her coming back into the program in 2017, and really I'd been there at that point in Nova kind of 3 years, and her and kind of Polly coming in at the same time in 2017 were kind of the catalyst to really get things moving and kind of get you to see where the program is now. She's in terms of the swimming side of things. Look, she's clearly a fabulous swimmer, but away from that, look, she's a fabulous person as well. Yeah. So she brought a massive amount to our group just through her being Freya. And same kind of thing. It'd be very, very rare for her to come in and she wasn't smiling. Or she wasn't, but she's a really bubbly character. You know, I know you lads interviewed her, didn't you?
We did. We
a
spoke
while
to
back.
her,
Yeah, after trials, like I've no doubt he had a good time interviewing her because she's just really friendly, really bubbly, gets on with everybody, and you know, so from that side of things, look, she's got all the attributes in terms of her personality to be able to move herself as high as she wants to go. From a swimming perspective, look, there isn't many girls that we've ever had in Britain that have been 157 on the 200 freestyle. She's clearly capable of going faster. You know, she's 6 foot tall. She's got big limbs. She's a great athlete. She does some unbelievable stuff in the pool. She's done some great stuff in the gym when I was working with her. She's now working with Dave Hemmings in Loughborough. And ultimately, her ceiling will be determined by her. Because if she wants to do it, she can take herself as far on that pathway as she wants to. You know, you know, and you know, one of the things I do think is that look, she's been 157 on the 200 freestyle, which is great. She goes 4:39 on the 400 IM. She goes 4:09 on the 400 free. I think what we've got to look at, she's obviously one of the better females that we have in Britain now. But look, if we're talking about being the best in the world, you look at what the Australian girls did at the Commonwealth Games this summer. Look, she needs to be able to go 153, and we've got to start thinking, I don't just want to be the best in Britain. Actually, right, well, how am I going to get myself to 153 or 154 on the 200 free? How am I going to go under 4 minutes for 400 free? And I've no doubt that her and Dave are talking about that on a regular basis. And she's an intelligent girl. She's doing a degree in bioengineering, so she's a smart girl. She knows what she's doing, and I've no doubt she'll make the most of what she's got.
Yeah, I saw her up at Scottish Winter Nationals, and it certainly looked like she was in good form there and set for a big season again. Really.
Yeah, I think it'll help her going to altitude. Obviously, when she was swimming with me, we didn't really have access to that because she was at school and stuff like that. So I think that all those bits, and it's kind of what we're talking about earlier around developing talent. You're able to layer things on. If every year you can do something new, you can change it, you can move things forward, then you're going to keep progressing. You know, so that hopefully stuff like that will be a big bonus for her.
Yeah. I mean, we teased it at the start, but should we talk about NOVA Centurion and take a look back at your time there? If you could name just one moment, would there be one moment that would be your best moment from your duration there?
Oh, I think probably there's obviously multiple highlights as you if you're in a role for 9 years. You know, I remember I remember being at nationals and my assistant coach Joe's taken over from me at Nova now, and me and Joe have worked together we'd worked together for 14 years. He used to swim for me. I coached him. And then he started coaching me back in 2010, and at the Royal. And then obviously when I came to Nova, he came and worked with me at Nova as well. I remember being stood after probably 2 or 3 years at Nova, and we're at nationals, and we didn't win any medals one year. And I'm stood there and I'm thinking, my God, is this something that we're doing here? But as with all this stuff, it takes time. So and this is what I'm saying earlier about failure. Look. You've got to have moments like that to then appreciate when you get to the height. I think probably look, there's and I say this to swimmers all the time. I remember as an example when I was coaching Joe, I was coaching people like Rachel Kelly and Alice Deering and a guy called Adam Rowe as well, who made European Juniors and World Juniors. But it was equally as important to me that Joe made his first ever nationals at 18, than it was Rachel Kelly winning World Juniors and European Juniors. Okay, so for me, the enjoyment comes from seeing somebody fulfill their potential. So although there's obviously highlights, and I think one of the big ones for us, for me personally, was last year at trials. Freya's gone. Best time on the 200 freestyle was 2 minutes point 9. She went 157.9. Her best time on the 400 free was like 4:16. She went 4:09. Just in that environment, to be able to, under significant pressure, she's been able to make the Commonwealth Games team, the World Championships team, the Europeans team all in one go. There's only the Olympic Games missing from that list. So I think that was a big highlight of being there for that period of time, but not outweighed by other swimmers in the program that have equally reached their ceiling. I've got a picture I'm in my office, and I've got a picture just up to the right hand side of me here of a girl called Molly Wright that used to swim in the program. She was there right when I started 9 years ago, and her winning, she's got a national silver medal around her neck. When I got there, she'd never won a national medal, but actually her winning that national medal was just as good an achievement for her as Freya becoming European champion on the mixed 4x2 relay. So I think that, there's obviously, there's highlights everywhere. There's just loads to pick out because you're dealing with fantastic athletes when you're in a program like NOVA.
Yeah, do you know what, Nathan? It says a lot about yourself, the man, when the first point you bring up when we say your favourite moment isn't Freya, because it could have been very easy to say that when you actually talk about failure. That was the first thing you mentioned, and I think that says so much about you and your philosophy in swimming, and it's been a theme throughout this whole podcast, really, about resilience. And I think it is really important that coaches, swimmers, anyone who's listening, kind of respect it when you do fail.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing as well is when, I'm obviously fortunate, I've kind of studied that concept for a couple of years. I think it's important to for people to understand that resilience isn't a trait. It's not something that you have or don't have. There'll be times when you are more resilient than others. Yeah. So it's a fluctuating thing. And part of the paper that myself and my staff have published was exactly that. We did it over a longitudinal period. So it was done over kind of 12 to 18 months. So we could measure and kind of conduct surveys that would identify that actually, look, it's a changing thing. It's not just I'm resilient or I'm not resilient. Actually, I'm working 60 hours a week. My house has just burnt down. Like, I don't feel that resilient today. That's okay. It's okay that do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but that was an extreme example, obviously. But you're not going to feel that resilient at that point. However, when you've actually done all the training, you've got it all out of the way, you turn up at trials, you get on the block, and actually I smash it out of the park. Actually, I feel pretty resilient. I feel pretty good, I think it's context specific, but it's okay not to feel that resilient on a given day because I've got multitude of stresses going on in my life at any one particular time.
Yeah. Do you know what? I want to round out the podcast by asking what your advice would be for coaches, but I feel like that's just nailed it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing on that, I'll not just coaches, swimmers and parents as well. I think it's a real key thing is make sure that you've got, because this will add to your resilience. Make sure you've got a great support network around you. So even if you don't, so you just know that you're able, if you need to discuss something or you need to get something off your chest, actually you're able to pick up the phone or go and see somebody and be able to do that. So whether it's perceived or received support, but you actually need that if you're going to be more resilient more often than not. So I think your support network, and I know that there'll be coaches that I ring regularly or talk, or friends, or because I think it's important that you have. Obviously, you've got your people you work with in swimming, but you obviously have a life away from that. So I think that it's really important that you've got the ability to switch off and kind of have a support network around you. That'll be a key thing for sure.
100%.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so many messages just in this episode alone. The fact that you've talked about resilience and the fact that failure is actually part of the journey. I think a lot of people forget that. I know Adam Peaty's won a lot, but he actually came second at the Commonwealth Games, and that actually spurred him on to go again. Mark Phelps obviously had a bit of a downtime after Beijing, but actually came back into London and did really well. So the best athletes have all suffered, I suppose, but then brought themselves back again. I think it's just part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look, you've only got to look at all the sporting greats. They've been through periods of time where they've not been that great, And Andy Murray's a prime example. One of our best ever sportsmen out of this country. His resilience must be off the chart. When he's because he's absolutely. He never gives up. I've never seen anything like it.
You're speaking to the right man in Dan about tennis.
That's one of the things with me. I'm any sport. Tiddlywinks. I'll enjoy watching it.
Well, Nathan, we do usually round up these podcasts with some quick fire questions. We've got a coach's edition. Do you sound up for answering those?
Yep. Yeah.
So what is your favourite stroke to coach?
I'll have to say 400 IM. I think 400 probably 400 IM distance based or endurance based events. But probably women's 400 IM because I've been pretty successful. But just a fact for you, look, Freya obviously broke out in the summer. She's not even the quickest 400 IM girl I've ever coached because Rosie Rudin was quicker than her on 400 IM, winning World Juniors and breaking the World Junior record in 2015. So she went 4:39.0 in 2015. So probably that event because I've been reasonably successful at it.
Who is your swimming idol?
Flipping heck. That is a big one because maybe not so much now, but certainly when I was younger, I was a bit of a swimming geek. Flipping heck.
I feel like this is easier for swimmers to answer because they've not been in the sport as long, but you've been. There's probably more than one, I would say. So look, can I have 5? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So look, I was pretty fortunate when I was swimming. I swam with an Olympic silver medalist. So I swam with a guy called Paul Palmer. So he won an Olympic silver medal in Atlanta in '96. So he did that out of a 4-lane 25-meter pool in Lincoln. Yeah. So I think that's pretty impressive. Probably Alex Popov,
Easy.
Probably one of the best. Well, up there with one of the best sprinters ever. Ian Thorpe, Grant Hackett, and then probably you've got to say Phelps, haven't you? Yeah. He's there. So there's I could go through loads like Christina Egazegi and like loads of them, but I've got kind of 4 or 5 there. I'm being greedy, really. So.
What's your proudest moment in swimming so far? I know we've touched upon it a little bit, but if you could narrow it down just to one moment in swimming.
I don't think there's really one moment. I think what I've obviously worked with some unbelievably talented guys over the course of the last 25 years. I think what I would say is proud about kind of when I went to Cleethorpes as the head coach there. I remember the first year that I started, we had 3 regional qualifiers and no national qualifiers. The year that I left in 2008, we had 40 regional qualifiers and 12 national swimmers. Yeah, so similar at the Royal, kind of built it from nothing, kind of like I've described about Nova. Look, we got pretty low, and then But for me, the proudest moments are always kind of seeing the fruition of your hard work come to pass. Really, absolutely. Yeah. And because I'm there to help other people do things they don't think are possible. That's ultimately what it is. So I couldn't really pinpoint to one thing, but I'm just proud that. Look, I like to think wherever I've been, I've tried to leave it in a better place than when I picked it up.
I like that answer. I like that. What's the hardest set you've ever given out in training?
Oh, oh, this would probably be like way back when. Like I'm talking like maybe 20 years ago now. But like I've been known. You'd have to speak to the swimmers because like they tell you some different answers because there's been some good ones. But I think probably like I've done dash stuff before, like 25 400s and stuff like that. So it'd maybe be five warm up, um, 18 as a main set, and then a couple swim down, something like that, So,
Lovely.
yeah, like I've got a pretty good one. So, Toby Robinson, I used to coach him, so he's obviously on the open water team. Alice Deering, obviously on the open water team, and then there's another lad called Tom Derbyshire as well. So Tom was a very good 1500 meters swimmer. I had them all in the same group at the Royal back in 2013, 2014. So just before I moved to Nova, they were all in my group. So one of the sets that we did was kind of endurance based, kind of open water specific. We did a dive 400 as quick as they could go, and that would have been off like maybe 4:30, 4:45, something like that. Straight into 6 800s, and we'd descend those 1 to 3, and then hold 4 to 6, and they would be off like 9:20 maybe, something like that. And then we'd go just to finish it off. They'd then go 10 100s off 110, just trying to hold as fast as they could possibly hold. So we're almost simulating a kind of open water race, really. So that was a pretty tough one as well. So, but like I say, talk to the swimmers; they'll tell you some good ones.
I was going to say pretty tough. I don't know. That's quite hard. I think that's really hard.
There's some ideas for coaches listening.
Absolutely.
Final question, to get to know you a little bit more away from the swimming pool. If you were to go on a road trip, there's 3 spaces in the car. You can take friends, family, celebrities, dead or alive, fully open. Who would you take with you?
Oh, looking at that's a good one. I would like to. So I'd like to take my dad. So my dad unfortunately is not here anymore. He passed away in 2005. So I'd like to take my dad. I'd like to take. In fact, I'll tell you what. Because my dad was there, I'd like to take Muhammad Ali, and I'd like to take George Best. Because my dad was a mad Man United fan, and we both love boxing as well. So probably those 3 people. And I'd probably squeeze my kids in the back as well. So.
Just in the boot.
yeah.
If you're forced to, yeah.
yeah. Take a 7-seater with me. Yeah.
Well, Nathan, it has been so much fun talking to you on this week's podcast. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, especially learning about the role that you're now in. I think it's really good for people to understand what that title means. And then, resilience, determination, the lot. It's been really, really good to listen to.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. No worries, guys. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's been brilliant. Honestly, learning about the whole role as a whole, I suppose. And hopefully you get to find some swimmers that you can guide through to be the next Adam Peaty, let's say. So yeah, best of luck to you.
Fingers crossed. Always a big team effort, as it always is. So we'll be trying our hardest to make sure that we do that.
100%. Cool.
Thanks, guys.
So Dan, brilliant to speak to Nathan in an episode that actually got far deeper than I ever thought it was going to get. Talking about resilience, mental toughness, like the positives of failure, but also learning about a role in British swimming that I knew was there. I knew there were people supporting swimmers as they came through the system. I didn't know enough about it. Especially, we've been doing this podcast for three years, and I didn't know enough about the performance pathway lead. I do now, and I'm very glad we had Nathan on to talk us through it.
Yeah, definitely. And I like the fact that he almost shares the role. I mean, he does a lot of distance sort of side of things, and I suppose when you're a younger swimmer coming through the ranks, you kind of want to do, like he was saying, you go through that sort of aerobic phase, and then when you've hit that sort of plateau, then you can go into the echelons of lactic acid and all that sort of stuff. But it's interesting that he has a shared role, and that he's able to learn on the job, if that makes sense. So he's doing his PhD as well, and supporting wise, there was so many messages. I think I said towards the end that it's like the learning from failure is a massive part of being an athlete. I think in life in general, it's not just about sport. And then a role of resilience. I mean, it's just, honestly, there's so many things to take away from it, and I'm really glad that he came on because we've learnt a lot from it.
Yeah, loads. I think in the world of sport, over the past, I'd say 5 years, I think mental health and awareness of that has become key to a successful athlete and a successful person. I know that in other sports there've been a bit of a backlash in terms of the way athletes were trained because there wasn't enough awareness of it. So I'm really glad that this guy, that Nathan Hilton, is in the role that he's in British swimming, bringing through these age group swimmers, these juniors to the elite stage, because his awareness, and we heard it, the awareness for resilience, we've said that word so many times, for mental health, to making sure what comes out the other end of this performance pathway is a better person, not a better swimmer, a better person. And I think maybe that's a message that every coach can take away from this. You're building people rather than swimmers. Like I could reflect on so many messages here.
Yeah, I mean, he was talking about Freya Colbert, of course, and he separates it out into two sections. You've got Freya the person, and you've got Freya the swimmer. And he, not disregarded, but he talks about the person first. And I think that is crucial. Yeah, always. The fact that she's so bubbly and personality-wise and gets on with everyone, etc., etc. And then once that was talked about, then he talks about her abilities in the pool. And I think that is crucial from any coaching point of view, and I think that's a massive thing to take away for every coach and every person out there.
It's very there's the ability to be self-reflective, because yes, he always wanted to look at the person, and we asked him about his best moment at NOVA, and straight away he went to what I would consider the worst moment. But it's then the journey from that essentially made his best moment. But he was able to reflect and look back on the harder times, and that is what makes success almost.
Yeah, well, like he was saying, he's brought success to everywhere he's gone, from, let's say, barely any regional swimmers or barely any national swimmers up to a level where they're one of the best in the country. And it's not just about Freya reaching Commonwealth Games or, Becky Adlington before reaching Olympic gold. It's the ones who, wanted to just make the podium at nationals or make a regional time. That's their ceiling. That's what they've always wanted to do. And their dreams are just as big as Freya, Becky's, everyone else who does make it onto the elite side. I think that's a good message for everyone out there.
Yeah, fascinating episode. One of my favorites so far for 2023, I think.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So that just about rounds up this week's episode. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so on our new YouTube channel, the Propulsion Swimming Podcast. We'll be posting new clips of not just this podcast episode essentially every day, but old podcast episodes from the amazing guests that we have had over the 145 episodes of the Propulsion Swimming Podcast so far. But until then, me and Dan will see you guys in 7 days' time.
Yeah, thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you on the next one.
You've been listening to the Propulsion Swimming Podcast with Scott and Dan. We want to thank you for joining us and invite you to subscribe to the show, as well as checking out the Propulsion Swimming YouTube channel for weekly tutorials and videos to get your swimming fix. We will be back next week. Until then, we'll catch you on the next one.